There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when heaven interrupts the normal flow of life, not with noise, not with chaos, but with a quiet divine appointment that shifts everything from the inside out. This message is not random. It is not accidental. It is not something you stumbled upon by chance. It has been sent to you by divine orchestration, in the exact timing you were meant to hear it. You are listening because heaven intended for your spirit to receive this now, not yesterday, not next year, but in this sacred moment. You are standing at a threshold. A spiritual doorway has opened before you, and your feet are positioned on the line that separates what was from what will be. For a long time, you have been in the season of awakening, your eyes opening, your spirit rising, your inner world shifting. But today, God wants you to understand something crucial. Awakening was never the destination. Awakening was preparation. The season of awakening is ending, not because you failed, not because you are unworthy, but because heaven is saying, now it is time for purpose. And purpose always requires timing, perfect timing, not human timing, divine appointment and perfect timing. From the beginning of your journey, even before you understood the language of the Spirit, circumstances have been aligning to bring you here. Every delay you experienced, every door that closed, every moment of silence, every season where you felt invisible or overlooked, none of it was wasted. It was orchestration. Heaven has been moving pieces in the unseen realm long before you recognized that God was positioning you. Many people live and die without ever experiencing the feeling that heaven has scheduled a moment specifically for them. Yet, here you are, standing inside a divine appointment. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you were meant to be, at the exact moment heaven intended. Your awakening was the call. Purpose is the assignment. And, as you stand on this threshold, God is saying, the awakening season is complete. Now walk into what you were created to do. For some time now you've been moving through a process that felt confusing at times, painful at others, but ultimately transformative. Awakening is not gentle, it is disruptive. It tears down illusions. It exposes lies you didn't even know you were living under. It forces you to confront the truth, the world, yourself, and God in a new way. You endured tests that most people will never understand. You went through battles you couldn't explain. You woke up spiritually in a world that is spiritually asleep. You began to see things differently, your relationships, your patterns, your calling, your identity. You recognized what was draining you. You saw who was truly for you and who was only attached to your old, unawakened version. Your spirit became sensitive, discerning, alert. Some of the people you once connected with no longer fit. Some of the environments you used to tolerate became heavy and suffocating. Why? Because awakening separates you from anything that can't exist with the version God is shaping you into. This is why the illusions fell apart. This is why the old life could no longer hold you. And this is why heaven is saying, the awakening did its job. Now you are ready. Your foundation is scriptural. Isaiah 6:7. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. This is not merely a poetic verse. It is a spiritual command, an activation, a declaration over you, and then God reinforces it with Romans 13:11. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber. You have awakened, you have risen, and now the instruction is move, walk, step into what comes next. Look around. If your spirit is open, you feel it. The world is not the same. The atmosphere is changing. The battle between light and darkness is no longer subtle. It is unmistakably intense. You can sense it in the decisions people are making. You can feel it in the spiritual heaviness hovering over society. You can see it in the collapse of old systems and the birth of new ones. This shift is not random. It is prophetic. The world is entering a time when spiritual clarity is rare, but spiritual deception is everywhere. People are hungry for truth but drowning in confusion. That is why the awakened ones, people like you, are being called forward right now, not to hide, not to withdraw, not to stay silent because you're unsure, but to stand as light carriers in a time when the world desperately needs what God has placed inside of you. Your awakening was not just about you, it was about the assignment waiting for you. Many people believe that awakening is the end of the journey. They think the goal is simply to wake up spiritually and then exist in some enlightened state. But God never awakens someone just so they can sit in awareness. Awareness is not purpose. Awakening is not completion. Awakening is the door. Purpose is the path. Awakening uncovers who you are. Purpose reveals what you are supposed to do with who you are. Here is the truth you may have struggled to accept. You are already prepared. You may feel unqualified. You may feel uncertain. You may feel like you don't know enough or have enough or understand enough. But God is saying, you are already equipped with everything your next season requires. Walk in it. This message is meant to break the hesitation that awakening often produces. Many chosen ones stay stuck in reflection, introspection, overthinking, and spiritual analysis because awakening reveals so much at once. But eventually, there comes a moment when heaven interrupts and says, the season of learning is complete. Now it is time for doing. So now we move into the next revelation, the 7 undeniable signs that your awakening is complete and that you are being called into purpose. These signs will confirm what your spirit already knows. They will explain what you've been feeling. And they will show you that your next season is not something to fear. It is something you were chosen for. Sign 1. You no longer feel separate. One of the first unmistakable signs that your awakening has come full circle is the quiet but powerful realization that you no longer feel separate, not from God, not from your purpose, and not from the spiritual reality that has always been calling you higher. Something within you has shifted. The inner distance you once felt, the inner conflict that once made you question who you are and where you stand, has dissolved. It didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened gradually, gently, through the tests, the prayers, the nights of wrestling, and the mornings of surrender. And now, without even trying to force it, you sense a unity, a closeness, a knowing that can only come from spiritual maturity. You begin to realize that loneliness and confusion fade when your spirit awakens to oneness with God. For most of your life, you may have felt alone even when surrounded by people. That emptiness wasn't a lack of human presence, it was the absence of spiritual awareness. But now, something within you has awakened to the truth spoken in Acts 17:28. In him we live and move and have our being. This verse is no longer just scripture to you, it has become revelation. You don't simply believe God is near, you have begun to recognize that God is within. There is a vast difference between knowing God exists and knowing that you exist in God. This awareness rewires your inner world. The loneliness that once felt heavy now feels impossible, because you've tasted the reality of divine companionship. Confusion begins to lose its power, because clarity comes not from external answers, but from internal alignment. You are no longer searching for God as if he were far away. Your spirit knows. He has been intertwined with your very breath the entire time. Where you once begged for connection, you now live in connection. Where you once felt distant, you now feel held. Where you once questioned your belonging, you now walk with assurance. This is the beginning of spiritual oneness. And as oneness grows, proof-seeking ends, because your spirit no longer needs external validation for what it knows internally. Before awakening matured in you, you may have spent a long time asking for signs, begging for confirmation, praying for reassurance, waiting for some supernatural proof that you were on the right path. You questioned your gifts, your calling, your journey, and sometimes even your worthiness. But now, something has changed. You've stepped into a place where the need for proof has evaporated, not because God stopped speaking, but because you finally started trusting. This is one of the clearest marks of spiritual maturity, quiet confidence, replacing desperate striving. You no longer ask, "God, are you with me?" You simply walk, knowing he is. You no longer plead, "Show me a sign." Your life is the sign. You no longer doubt whether you heard correctly. Your spirit has become so attuned to divine whispers that you recognize his leading even in silence. This peace does not come from pride. It comes from alignment. It comes from being rooted, anchored, synced in spirit. The striving that once exhausted you has been replaced by a steady assurance. I am guided. I am held. I am not alone. And this newfound confidence transforms your view of hardship, giving you a new perspective on trials you once feared. Before, every challenge felt like punishment. Every setback felt like delay. Every closed door felt like rejection. But when awakening matures into purpose, trials are seen through a different lens. You begin to understand what James 1:2-3 has been teaching all along. Count it all joy, because the testing of your faith produces endurance. You don't rejoice because of the pain. You rejoice because you now understand the purpose behind the pain. Hardship becomes training, not torture. Trials become preparation, not punishment. Pressure becomes formation, not destruction. You begin to see how every difficult season refined your character, sharpened your discernment, and purified your intentions. The trials didn't break you. They built the strength required for the assignment ahead. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, your spirit asks, "What is this shaping in me?" This is the posture of someone who has completed awakening. This is the mindset of someone entering purpose. And from this place of trust and clarity, you naturally shift into alignment with divine flow, where peace, not resistance, becomes your foundation. Awakening makes you aware. Purpose puts you in alignment. For the first time, you feel the river of God's guidance carrying you rather than fighting against the current. You make decisions with clarity. You walk with intention. You move with a rhythm that feels natural, not forced. The things that once drained you no longer attach to you. The people who once distracted you fall away without conflict. You sense the flow of divine timing rather than trying to control every detail. This is what happens when resistance ends. Peace becomes your default setting, not because life is perfect, but because you are aligned. Everything begins to unfold in a way that feels orchestrated rather than chaotic. Doors open not because you push, but because you're positioned. Insights come, not because you're anxious, but because you're receptive. Your spirit begins to navigate life with grace, trust, and inner certainty. Peace becomes your anchor. Flow becomes your guide. Alignment becomes your lifestyle. And this is the sign, the unmistakable sign, that awakening is complete and purpose is calling. When you no longer feel separate, when your confidence no longer depends on external signs, when trials no longer shake your identity, and when peace becomes your natural atmosphere, you are no longer in the awakening stage. You are standing in readiness. You are standing in purpose. Sign 2. Your intuition becomes your compass. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when your awakening matures is the strengthening of your inner guidance. What once felt like a faint whisper, something easy to overlook, easy to doubt, easy to silence, now rises within you like a steady, undeniable compass. Your intuition is no longer something you question or second guess. It becomes your internal navigation system, your spiritual GPS, the voice that directs you with clarity and conviction. And as this inner voice grows stronger, you realize it is not just intuition, it is partnership with the Spirit of God. You begin to understand that intuition strengthens when the inner voice shifts from a whisper to a guiding command. There was a time in your life when you struggled to discern the difference between your thoughts and God's direction. You spent years trying to filter through noise, doubt, and fear. You wanted to hear God, but everything felt muddled. You weren't sure whether the nudge you felt was divine or just your imagination. But now, something has changed. Your inner voice has become louder, not in volume, but in authority. It speaks with clarity. It speaks with direction. It speaks with unmistakable weight. This is the fulfillment of Isaiah 30:21, which says, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, You will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." You used to pray for guidance, now you recognize it. You used to beg for clarity. Now, clarity rises from within. You used to listen outwardly. Now you listen inwardly, because the Spirit speaks from the inside, not from the outside. This is what it means when intuition becomes a compass. You no longer wander. You no longer hesitate. You no longer drown in confusion. Your spirit has become tuned to the frequency of God. And as your inner compass sharpens, your dependence on others' opinions naturally begins to fade. You may not realize it, but one of the signs your awakening was still in progress was your need for external validation. You felt uncertain, unsure, unsteady. You sought insight from friends, mentors, leaders, and sometimes even strangers. You needed reassurance because you didn't yet trust your own discernment. But when intuition becomes your compass, a shift occurs that is both liberating and powerful. You stop asking others what you should do. Your decision-making becomes clear, not because life becomes easier, but because your spirit becomes confident. You recognize that while people can offer advice, only God can offer direction. You move when the Spirit says move. You stay when the Spirit says stay. You shift when the Spirit says shift. Others may not understand. They may question your timing. They may think you're being too bold, too fast, too different, but you are no longer led by human approval. You are led by divine alignment. This is the mark of someone who has left the awakening stage and entered spiritual maturity. The opinions that once weighed on you now feel light, almost irrelevant, because your compass is no longer external, it is within you, divinely guided. And this inner clarity teaches you that obedience matters more than logic, revealing the limits of the mind and the supremacy of intuition. Logic is useful, logic is necessary, but logic has limits, especially in the spiritual realm. Your mind wants predictability, it wants proof, it wants guarantees, but purpose rarely comes with a detailed map. Destiny rarely unfolds in perfect sequence. Divine instruction often looks illogical on the surface. This is where obedience becomes greater than reasoning. You begin to understand the power of spiritual instruction the same way Abraham did when God told him to leave everything familiar, to step into the unknown with no details, no roadmap, no explanation. Logic would have told him, stay where it's safe, stay where you understand the terrain, stay where life makes sense. But destiny whispered something different, and Abraham chose obedience over logic. You, too, are entering that realm. There will be times when your spirit says, go, and your mind will say, but why? There will be moments when God nudges you to shift, and the circumstances won't seem ready. There will be decisions that feel risky, but your intuition will burn with certainty. This is not recklessness, this is obedience. When intuition becomes your compass, you learn to trust what the Spirit knows that your mind has not yet understood. You follow inner direction, even when outer evidence is missing. You move with faith, not with fear. You walk with spiritual intelligence, not merely human logic. And in this posture of obedience, you step into doors that only faith can open. And as obedience deepens, fear dissolves, because intuition births courage, clarity, and unshakable inner strength. Fear thrives in uncertainty. Fear grows in confusion. Fear survives when you don't know which voice to trust. But once your intuition becomes your compass, fear loses its authority. Clarity conquers fear. Alignment weakens fear. Spiritual confidence suffocates fear. You feel a courage rising within you, not a loud, aggressive courage, but a quiet, steady one. The kind of courage that comes from knowing you are being guided by something bigger than yourself. The kind of courage that allows you to take bold steps without trembling. The kind of courage that makes you realize, if God is directing you, nothing can stop you. If intuition is leading you, nothing can confuse you. If your spirit is aligned, nothing can derail you. Fear does not disappear because life becomes easy. Fear disappears because you become anchored. You have stepped into a spiritual posture where courage is natural, clarity is expected, and obedience is instinctive. This is the transformation that marks the completion of awakening and the beginning of purpose, when your intuition becomes your compass, when the inner voice strengthens, when you no longer rely on others' opinions, when obedience outweighs logic, and when fear dissolves in the presence of spiritual clarity. You are no longer awakening, you are navigating, you are aligning, you are being led by God Himself. Sign 3. Material desires lose their power. One of the clearest marks that your awakening has reached its fullness is the gentle yet undeniable shift in your relationship with the material world. Things that once captivated your attention now feel strangely small. Possessions that once motivated you now feel secondary. Status that once mattered now feels meaningless. It's not that you reject the physical world, it's that the physical world no longer holds the power it once did over your mind, emotions, or identity. Something deeper is taking place within you, something sacred, something eternal. Your spirit is breaking free from materialism. You begin to realize that true freedom emerges when success and status no longer define you. For much of your life, you were conditioned to chase what society told you mattered: the right job, the right image, the right income, the right level of recognition. You were taught that your value depended on what you owned, what you achieved, or how impressive your life looked to others. And maybe for a season you bought into that narrative. Many chosen ones do, because the world rewards and praises outward gain. But awakening rewrites that script. You suddenly see what Jesus meant in Luke 12:15, when He warned, "A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions," and you understand the weight of Matthew 16:26, "What good is it to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul?" These verses become more than scripture. They become revelation. They become freedom. Success stops being the thing you chase. Status stops being the thing you crave. You feel a release, a soft letting go of the need to prove anything to anyone. Your worth no longer comes from what you have. It comes from who you are becoming. The world's definition of abundance collapses, and your spirit begins to rise above the illusion that material gain equals fulfillment. You no longer measure your life by accumulation but by alignment, and as this transformation deepens, you learn to enjoy blessings without being enslaved by them. This is the beautiful paradox of spiritual maturity. You appreciate things more while needing them less. When you were less awakened, you might have felt a strong attachment to outcomes, possessions, or the symbols of success. You might have defined yourself by your achievements, or feared losing what you worked for. But now an internal shift has taken place. You can receive blessings, financial, material, relational, without clinging to them. For identity, you enjoy, but do not worship. You receive, but do not depend. You use, but are not used. Material blessings become tools, not idols, gifts, not gods. This is a form of spiritual mastery that few people reach. When you can walk in abundance without being overtaken by it, you demonstrate that your heart is aligned with heaven's priorities rather than earth's temptations. Whether you have much or little, your spirit remains steady. Your joy isn't tied to possessions. Your peace isn't tied to circumstances. Your identity isn't tied to external validation. You can let go without fear. You can receive without pride. You can prosper without losing yourself. This is the maturity God has been shaping within you. And from this place of inner freedom, your identity shifts, revealing that purpose becomes more important than possessions. There comes a moment when a chosen one realizes that everything they were chasing was only a shadow of what their soul truly desired. That moment is the turning point, the moment you stop asking, "What can I get?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming? Who am I called to impact? What eternal imprint is my life meant to leave?" Possessions used to feel like the prize. Now, purpose feels like oxygen. You start craving growth, not accumulation, wisdom, not wealth, impact, not image, depth, not applause. Your spirit begins to hunger for meaning, calling, fulfillment, and divine assignment. You feel a pull to elevate not for self-glory, but for service. You want to serve people, help people, guide people, and grow into the version of yourself that God has been shaping since the beginning. The ego that once needed validation slowly dissolves. The mask you once wore falls away. The competition, comparison, and striving lose their grip on you. Purpose becomes the lens through which you make decisions. Purpose becomes the fire that fuels your actions. Purpose becomes the standard you live by. Possessions may enhance your life, but they no longer define your life. Your identity has shifted from material to eternal, and as your identity aligns with purpose, you begin to redefine prosperity itself, discovering that true wealth is peace, purpose, giving, and trust in God's provision. This is where the deepest transformation occurs. You realize that prosperity is not measured in dollars, but in faith, not in accumulation, but in alignment, not in luxury, but in inner abundance. When awakening matures, your definition of wealth expands beyond anything the world has taught you. Prosperity becomes peace that the world cannot take from you. Purpose that gives your life meaning. A heart that delights in giving, not hoarding. A spirit anchored in trust, not in fear of lack. You understand that God is your source, not the job, not the bank account, not the marketplace, not the economy. You move with confidence because your provision comes from a higher realm. Money becomes a tool for impact. Resources become seeds for growth. Blessings become opportunities to sow into others. You no longer fear losing what you have, because you know God can replace anything, restore anything, and multiply anything surrendered to Him. This is true prosperity, a life that is rich in peace, rich in alignment, rich in generosity, rich in trust. A life where abundance flows not from striving, but from spiritual alignment. When material desires lose their power, when possessions no longer define your identity, when purpose becomes your priority, and when prosperity is rooted in peace and trust, you have stepped into a level of spiritual maturity few ever reach. You are no longer driven by the world. You are driven by heaven. Sign 4. You embrace solitude and find peace. One of the clearest signs that your spiritual awakening has matured is that stillness becomes your sanctuary, a place you no longer run from but naturally return to. What once felt like an empty room now feels like a holy ground, a private meeting place between your soul and God. Silence no longer feels lonely. Instead, it becomes the purest language of heaven. You begin to understand the divine echo of "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. Not just as a verse, but as a lived reality. As you step deeper into this realm of stillness, you notice something astonishing. Inner renewal begins to happen effortlessly, rising like fresh water from a well you didn't know existed. The noise of the world fades, and suddenly, clarity flows with ease. Thoughts that once tangled you now unravel. Decisions that once burdened you become simple. In this new space, you stop seeking external validation because you finally understand that approval from people will never compare to alignment with God. You begin to choose authenticity over applause, purpose over people-pleasing, and inner truth over external noise. This transformation naturally reshapes your relationships. As your inner world becomes stable and peaceful, healthy relationship boundaries form organically. You are no longer interested in forcing draining connections or maintaining relationships that require you to shrink, perform, or pretend. You stop apologizing for wanting peace. You stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you prioritize wholeness, emotional safety, and mutual respect. This shift is not born from bitterness. It is born from wisdom. You're not shutting people out. You're honoring your capacity. You're not isolating. You're choosing alignment. Your spirit begins to instinctively protect what God is building inside you. You start to understand that every connection has a spiritual cost, and you choose to invest only where there is reciprocity, nourishment, and authenticity. As you embody this peace more consistently, something powerful happens without you even trying. Your radiance and calmness become noticeable to others. People may not understand the details of your transformation, but they can feel it. They sense the softness in your energy, the steadiness in your presence, the quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. You become a walking invitation to peace, a reminder that stillness is strength and alignment is attractive. This is the kind of peace Paul described, the peace that surpasses all understanding. Philippians 4:7. It is not fragile. It is not dependent on circumstances. It is not easily shaken by other people's chaos. It is a God-given shield that guards your heart and mind. But here's the deeper truth. Embracing solitude is not about being alone. It's about being aligned. It's about creating an inner environment where God's voice is louder than fear, where your spirit is louder than confusion, where wisdom rises above noise. Solitude teaches you that peace is not something you chase. It is something you cultivate. It is not something the world gives. It is something heaven releases when you create space for it. In solitude, you begin to see yourself clearly, not through fear, not through insecurity, not through the expectations of others, but through the eyes of God. You rediscover your essence. You reconnect with your original design. You remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. This is why solitude becomes so powerful during spiritual awakening. It detoxes your energy. It purifies your motives. It sharpens your discernment. It heals emotional bruises you didn't even know were still there. It realigns you with your true assignment. And the more time you spend in this sacred stillness, the more you begin to realize that peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of God. That calmness isn't a personality trait, it's a spiritual inheritance. That solitude isn't isolation, it's preparation. You learn to welcome the quiet moments with the same gratitude you give to answered prayers. You start cherishing mornings where the only sound is your breath. You begin to see your alone time as divine appointments, moments where heaven whispers direction, correction, creativity, and comfort. And in this renewed solitude, you become anchored. You no longer fear being alone, because you are not alone. You are accompanied by presence, guided by intuition, strengthened by faith, and grounded in purpose. You no longer crave constant noise because silence is now your teacher. You no longer chase crowds because you've learned that destiny often grows in private. The world taught you that being alone was a weakness. Your awakening reveals that being alone with God is one of your greatest strengths. This is the peace that frees you, the stillness that grows you, the solitude that shapes you into the person heaven always knew you were becoming. Sign 5. People are drawn to your light. As your awakening deepens, something begins to unfold around you, almost without your awareness. Your spiritual influence increases without effort, drawing people in ways you never intended or planned. You don't promote yourself. You don't seek attention. You don't try to be impressive. Yet somehow, people confide in you, seek your presence, ask for guidance, pour out their burdens, and feel safe in your company. You become living proof of Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world, not because you're perfect, but because your inner transformation radiates outward, touching others in ways words cannot fully explain. This kind of influence isn't loud, it's not flashy, it's not forceful. It is felt before it is seen. As you continue walking in alignment, an aura of peace and wisdom begins to form around you, a natural glow that doesn't announce itself but is undeniably present. Your presence speaks louder than your words. Your calmness corrects chaos. Your clarity dissolves confusion. Your composure comforts the anxious. You become the person others feel safe being vulnerable with, not because you try to fix them, but because you carry an atmosphere where healing begins. Naturally, people can sense when a person has done the inner work. They notice your groundedness. They notice your peace. They notice the absence of ego, defensiveness, and unnecessary noise, and they are drawn to this stability like moths to light. But as your light increases, something else also evolves. Your discernment in relationships sharpens dramatically. You suddenly become aware of who truly deserves access to you and who only wants proximity to your energy. You no longer chase crowds. You no longer cling to relationships out of fear, guilt, or history. You begin choosing depth over quantity, alignment over attachment, and purpose over familiarity. This is where Proverbs 4:23 becomes alive. Guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life. Not in a defensive way, but in a wise and spiritually mature way. Because as your light grows, not everyone comes with pure intentions. Some are drawn to your peace because they lack it. Some are drawn to your compassion because they want to drain it. Some are drawn to your wisdom because they want shortcuts to healing they haven't committed to. And others, the right ones, are drawn to your light because their soul recognizes yours. This is why discernment becomes essential. You begin to see beyond appearances. You feel energy before you hear words. You sense motives before they are spoken. You recognize spiritual alignment before relational commitment. Your intuition quietly alerts you to who is safe, who is sent, who is seasonal, and who must be released. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, because the old version of you may have wanted to be available to everyone, but the awakened you knows that not everyone can accompany you into your next level. And that is not rejection, it is divine protection. And as this discernment sharpens, something beautiful happens. You naturally align with other awakened souls, people who operate at your frequency, understand your journey, honor your boundaries, and speak the same spiritual language. These connections feel like home. There is no competition, no pretending, no draining, no confusion. You start noticing that your circle becomes smaller but deeper, fewer in number but richer in substance. These are people who encourage your growth, sharpen your purpose, and support your evolution. People who understand silence, people who value authenticity, people who love from the soul, not from the ego. Your conversations shift, your friendships shift, your values shift, your energy shifts. And with this shift comes a profound sense of belonging not to the world, but to your tribe, to your purpose, to your divine identity. This new relational ecosystem has 3 characteristics. 1. You attract people who seek truth, not drama. They come to you because they sense wisdom, not noise. They value your mind, your heart, your clarity. They rise to your level instead of pulling you down to theirs. 2. You repel those who rely on chaos to feel significant. Your peace exposes their restlessness. Your boundaries expose their entitlement. Your growth triggers their insecurity, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your evolution highlights areas they refuse to change. 3. You magnetize your soul family, those destined to walk with you. These people are aligned with your purpose. They amplify your strengths, understand your silence, and support your mission. They appear at the exact season God knows you need them. This attraction of the right people and release of the wrong ones is not random, it's divine orchestration. Your awakening is reorganizing your relational landscape to support your destiny. And through this process, you realize something powerful. You no longer shine to be seen. You shine because it is who you are. Your light is not a performance, it is an overflow, a byproduct of healing, surrender, obedience, and divine alignment. And this light, your authenticity, your wholeness, your wisdom becomes a lighthouse for others, navigating their own storms. You become a safe harbor, a steady presence, a quiet reminder that spiritual transformation is possible. People don't just see your light, they feel it. They don't just admire your strength, they draw courage from it. They don't just watch your journey, they are inspired to begin their own. When God begins to elevate your spirit, He simultaneously elevates your influence, not through noise, but through depth, not through status, but through presence, not through striving, but through becoming. And that is why people are drawn to your light, because you carry what many are secretly seeking: peace, clarity, authenticity, and divine alignment. Sign 6. You see through deception and illusion. As your awakening reaches maturity, something extraordinary begins to shift within you. Your discernment becomes unmistakably heightened, sharpening your senses and illuminating what once remained hidden. You begin detecting dishonesty and manipulation, not through accusation, but through spiritual clarity. Energy reveals what words try to conceal. Intentions whisper louder than actions. People's motives become transparent, even when their words appear kind or flattering. And this deeper perception aligns perfectly with Romans 12:2, which reminds us not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Because a renewed mind sees differently, discerns differently, and responds differently. This new vision is not physical sight, it is spiritual perception. You feel truth, you sense misalignment, you discern the unseen currents moving beneath conversations, relationships, environments, and decisions. It's as though the fog that once clouded your judgment has evaporated, and now you navigate life with an inner clarity that cannot be fabricated or taught by the world. This is spiritual maturity, God trusting you with deeper awareness. As this discernment grows stronger, your awareness of the world's illusions becomes sharper than ever, revealing social, cultural, emotional, and even spiritual deceptions that once appeared normal. You begin noticing how the world glorifies distractions and sells illusions of success, happiness, and purpose. You see how culture encourages people to chase validation, comparison, status, and noise, instead of truth, peace, purpose, and identity. You also become aware of how fear is used to control the masses, how confusion is manufactured to weaken conviction, how superficiality is celebrated while authenticity is buried. And because you see so clearly now, you can no longer be manipulated by trends, pressured by society, or deceived by appearances. Your awakening has upgraded your vision. This does not lead to judgment, it leads to liberation. This is not about superiority, it is about clarity. You simply see what you could not see before, and as the illusions fall away, you begin choosing truth over fear, no longer allowing anxiety or intimidation to dictate your decisions. The chains of fear that once held you back lose their grip. Situations that once overwhelmed you no longer feel threatening. Opinions that once controlled you no longer concern you. You realize that fear was never the voice of truth. It was the voice of limitation, insecurity, and distortion. Then John 8:32 becomes alive in you, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is not just a scripture, it becomes your lived reality. Truth frees your mind, truth frees your decisions, truth frees your destiny, truth frees your spirit. And with this newfound freedom, a deeper transformation unfolds. Your movement becomes wise, intentional, and purpose-driven, because you simply cannot go back to living aimlessly. You no longer pursue things that do not align with your spirit. You no longer chase goals rooted in ego. You no longer waste energy trying to prove yourself. Clarity becomes the compass that determines your path, your choices, your relationships, your reactions, and your direction. You begin choosing with precision. You begin acting with conviction. You begin moving with discernment. You begin living with purpose. You see that not every opportunity is divine, not every open door is meant for you, not every connection is destiny, and not every voice deserves your attention. You stop being impressed by surface-level things, titles, popularity, promises, or appearances, because you have learned to examine the spirit behind the outward expression. This clarity simplifies your life dramatically. You no longer wrestle with indecision. You no longer waste time on dead ends. You no longer tolerate manipulation. You no longer allow distractions to steal your focus. Instead, your soul becomes anchored, your steps become ordered, your vision becomes steady, your purpose becomes undeniable. This is the evidence of spiritual awakening, fully maturing. The truth is, when God sharpens your discernment, He separates you from deception. Not only the deception in the world, but the deception you once believed about yourself, the lies of unworthiness, being behind, being unprepared, being inadequate, being alone. Those illusions dissolve under the light of divine revelation. You begin seeing yourself clearly, chosen, equipped, purposeful, guided, and protected. Discernment does not make you fearful, it makes you fearless. Discernment does not make you suspicious, it makes you wise. Discernment does not make you hard, it makes you anchored. This awakening to truth affects every dimension of your life. 1. In relationships, you sense manipulation instantly. You recognize emotional immaturity. You avoid spiritual misalignment. You no longer fall for charm without character. 2. In choices, you are guided by conviction, not convenience. You choose alignment, not approval. You move when God says move, and you wait when God says wait. 3. In identity, you stop believing lies about who you are. You stand taller. You think differently. You break patterns that once held you captive. 4. In purpose, you stop drifting. You stop repeating cycles. You stop living below your calling. You begin to walk boldly in your divine assignment. This ability to see through illusion is one of the strongest signs that awakening is complete, because you are no longer controlled by what is superficial, temporary, deceptive, or manipulative. Instead, you live from a higher realm of truth, clarity, and divine intelligence. Your eyes have changed, your mind has changed, your spirit has changed, your path has changed, and now, with deception exposed and truth embraced, you are prepared for the next stage, the stage where God no longer just awakens you, but activates you. Sign 7. You feel the call to step into your mission. As your awakening reaches its maturity, an inner urgency begins to awaken within you, a deep fire that refuses to be silenced or ignored. It rises from a place beyond logic, beyond emotion, beyond ambition. It comes from the center of your spirit, undeniable, unshakable, persistent. This inner fire is not anxiety and not pressure. It is calling. It is destiny, tapping on the walls of your soul, saying, "You were made for more. You were prepared for this." And this fire mirrors the cry of Jeremiah 20:9, a fire shut up in your bones that cannot stay quiet. You know something within you must be released, expressed, lived out. You know there is work you are meant to do, people you are meant to impact, a path you are meant to walk. You can feel the voice of purpose rising louder than ever. This calling manifests as a holy discontent, a spiritual restlessness, a stirring that lets you know the time for passivity has expired. You can no longer sit in the background. You can no longer dim your light to fit in. You can no longer settle for comfort when your soul is crying for impact. This urgency is not random, it is divine timing, aligning with your readiness. And as the call grows louder, you begin to feel a profound restlessness whenever you are out of alignment, because anything that lacks eternal meaning suddenly feels empty and meaningless. Activities that once entertained you now feel shallow. Conversations that once fascinated you now feel draining. Goals that once excited you now feel too small. You can feel the difference between what feeds your purpose and what starves your soul. It becomes impossible to stay in environments that diminish your spirit. It becomes unbearable to carry out tasks that do not align with your calling. Your spirit begins to reject anything that pulls you away from your divine assignment. Even the smallest misalignment becomes noticeable, because awakened people cannot pretend to be asleep. You are being pulled towards something bigger, something deeper, something destined. This shift makes you start sensing more clearly than ever the specific forms your mission might take, whether it is teaching, healing, creating, leading, mentoring, serving, interceding, building, or uplifting others. Every chosen one has a unique expression of purpose, and while the world may categorize callings, heaven sees them all as vital. For some, the mission is teaching, bringing light, understanding, and revelation to others. For others, it is healing emotionally, spiritually, or physically. For some, it is creating using art, words, music, or innovation to ignite hearts. For others, it is leading, guiding communities, teams, or movements. For some, it is serving humbly, lifting others, offering compassion, and embodying Christ-like love. No mission is small, no calling is insignificant. Every purpose is part of a larger divine tapestry, and the clearer this mission becomes, the more you realize how every chapter of your life, the blessings and the battles, the breakthroughs and the betrayals, was shaping you for this moment. Yes, you begin to recognize that you have been prepared for this season, even when you didn't realize it. Every trial carved strength into you, every disappointment refined your discernment, every heartbreak expanded your compassion, every delay cultivated your patience, every waiting season built endurance, and every spiritual battle forged authority in you. Nothing was wasted, nothing was accidental, nothing was meaningless. The moments you questioned were training, the seasons you suffered were shaping, the times you felt forgotten were preparation, the years you felt hidden were incubation. You were not being overlooked, you were being developed. And now that your spirit is awakening to the reality of your mission, you understand Esther 4:14 inches, a new way. You were created for such a time as this, not for yesterday, not for someday, for this moment, this season, this generation. This revelation begins to shift how you see yourself. You stop comparing yourself to others. You stop shrinking to keep peace. You stop doubting your worth. You stop questioning whether you're ready, because you feel it, the timing, the alignment, the readiness. Awakening wasn't the destination, it was preparation for activation. As this call grows louder, your priorities change. 1. You choose purpose over comfort. You're willing to stretch, learn, and grow. You refuse to settle for mediocrity or stagnation. 2. You choose obedience over delay. When Spirit says move, you move. When God says speak, you speak. You no longer negotiate with destiny. 3. You choose impact over invisibility. You stop hiding your gifts. You stop minimizing your abilities. You stop dimming your light. 4. You choose alignment over attachment. You release what no longer matches where God is taking you. You value integrity over familiarity. 5. You choose courage over fear. Even if you don't feel perfectly ready, you step anyway, because purpose does not wait for perfection. It responds to willingness. Your mission may not be fully revealed yet, but the inner pull is real, strong, and continuous. It grows daily, expanding your vision and awakening your sense of responsibility. You begin to understand that your mission is not just about you. It's about the lives you're meant to touch, the souls you're meant to uplift, the people you're called to free, the generations you're destined to impact. Your life stops being about survival and becomes about assignment. Your days stop being repetitive and become intentional. Your actions stop being reactive and become purposeful. This is what it feels like when awakening turns into activation, when spiritual awareness evolves into destiny movement. You do not just feel called, you feel commanded. You do not just feel inspired, you feel chosen. And deep within, you know the truth. This is your time. This is your season. This is your mission. As this journey reaches its closing moment, you begin to understand something profound and liberating. Everything you have endured, everything you have learned, everything you have awakened to was never meant to be the end. It was preparation for who you were always meant to become. Awakening was not the finish line, it was the doorway. And now, standing on the threshold of your destiny, You can finally see clearly that your identity and purpose are not things you must earn, chase, or manufacture. They have always been written into your spiritual DNA. This is why your identity and purpose must now be affirmed within you, not as hopeful wishes, but as unshakable truths. You are not random, you are not overlooked, you are not insignificant. You are God's handiwork, intentionally crafted, divinely designed, uniquely shaped, created for works that were prepared in advance for you to walk in. Ephesians 2:10 becomes more than a comforting verse. It becomes the foundation of your new self-understanding. You were created on purpose, for a purpose, in perfect alignment with divine timing. This realization is what allows you to step boldly into what comes next. Because once you know who you are, nothing can convince you otherwise. Once you understand your origin, no darkness can distort your destiny. Once you are rooted in your identity, fear loses its grip, comparison loses its voice, and doubt loses its authority. You finally see yourself through heaven's eyes, chosen, capable, equipped, and needed. And with this identity comes the next revelation. Your words and intentions now carry far more power than you once realized, because as a spiritually awakened one, your speech has become aligned with divine authority. Proverbs 18:21 declares that life and death are in the power of the tongue, meaning what you say becomes the seeds of what you experience. You are no longer speaking from insecurity, but from identity. You are no longer speaking from fear, but from faith. You are no longer speaking from wounds, but from wisdom. This is why your declarations matter now more than ever. Your assignments respond to what you speak. Your atmosphere shifts according to your words. Your reality bends to your intention. You must speak your purpose, declare your direction, affirm your identity, and align your future with divine truth. Your mouth is no longer a passive instrument, it is a spiritual weapon. Every word becomes construction material for your destiny. And as your words shift, so must your boundaries, because you must guard your mission with the same focus and unshakable discipline that Nehemiah showed when rebuilding the wall, refusing distractions, resisting manipulation, and rejecting anything that would pull him off assignment. This story becomes symbolic of your own journey now. You must guard your environment, your time, your relationships, your energy, and your focus. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for your purpose. Your mission is too important to let anyone dilute it. Your destiny is too precious to let anything derail it. Your calling is too sacred to let the wrong voices influence it. You are being called to build with intention, with commitment, with consistency, understanding that your yes to purpose will require your no to distraction. Your boundaries are not walls of isolation. They are gates of stewardship. They are spiritual armor. They are divine filters, ensuring you remain aligned, empowered, and effective. And as you stand firmly in your identity, speak life into your future, and guard your purpose with spiritual discipline, you step into the final truth of this journey. Your light must shine now, not someday, not eventually, not after you feel more prepared. The time has come. You are no longer in training. You are no longer in the shadows. You are no longer rehearsing. You are ready. Matthew 5:16 comes alive in you. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. This is not a suggestion, it is a calling. Your light is not for hiding. Your gifts are not for storage. Your wisdom is not for silence. Your presence is not for shrinking. The world doesn't just need you, the world is waiting for you. There are people assigned to your voice, your ideas, your compassion, your healing, your leadership, your creativity. There are hearts only you can reach. There are battles only you can win. There are rooms only you can impact. There are stories only you can tell. There are destinies tied to your obedience. You stepping forward is not about spotlight, it is about service. It is not about pride, it is about purpose. It is not about being seen, it is about being used. And when you allow your light to shine, the world becomes brighter because you said yes. Darkness loses ground because you stood tall. Confusion dissolves because you walked in clarity. Brokenness finds healing because you carried compassion. Souls are awakened because you embraced your mission. Generations shift because you walked in obedience. This is why awakening was only the beginning. It taught you who you are. It revealed what matters. It stripped away illusion. It awakened your spirit. But now you rise. Now you move. Now you build. Now you shine. Your life is no longer a passive experience. It is a divine assignment. Your purpose is no longer distant. It is active. Your awakening is no longer theoretical. It is embodied. You are stepping into the chapter you were born for. Everything behind you trained you. Everything within you equips you. Everything before you calls you. And now the message is clear. Awakening was preparation. Purpose is the destination. And your time has begun. As we come to the end of this message, we enter a sacred moment of alignment, a moment to breathe, to open, and to acknowledge everything God has awakened within you. And so we begin this closing prayer with thanksgiving for the spiritual awakening you've walked through, because gratitude is the doorway that seals revelation into transformation. Father, we thank you for the awakening you have stirred inside this chosen one. Thank you for every moment of clarity, every tear that softened the heart, every shift that lifted the veil, and every step that has drawn them closer to your presence. Thank you for the courage to see, the strength to change, and the humility to surrender. What you awaken, you sustain, and this journey is evidence of your unfailing love. And as this gratitude rises, we move into a deeper truth by reaffirming our oneness with you. Because as Acts 17:28 declares, in him we live and move and have our being. Lord, remind this chosen one that they are never separate from you, not in silence, not in confusion, not in joy, not in fear. Let them feel the truth that your breath fills their lungs, your wisdom guides their steps, and your presence surrounds their entire being. Let this oneness dissolve every illusion of isolation. Let them know that you have never left them, not even for a moment. With this awareness restored, we now pray for strengthening of intuition and deeper trust, because as Isaiah 30:21 promises, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Lord, sharpen their spiritual hearing. Let confusion fall away like dust in the wind. Cause their inner compass, the one you personally designed, to grow stronger, clearer, and more confident. Let your whisper rise above every noise, guiding them into decisions that honor their mission, their identity, and their divine purpose. Make trust their default posture. Make peace their confirmation. Make discernment their shield. And as their intuition strengthens, we ask for complete freedom from material anxiety, because you have commanded us, in Luke 12:15, to guard ourselves against greed and fear surrounding earthly things. Father, release them from the burdens of not enough. Remove every subconscious chain tied to worldly pressure, comparison, or fear of scarcity. Teach their heart that provision flows from your hand, not from striving. Teach them that contentment is strength, not weakness. Let them walk in a prosperity that begins within the soul, the kind no economic shift can take away. With that freedom established, we enter the prayer of peace in solitude, anchored in the example of Jesus, who withdrew to lonely places to pray. Luke 5:16. Lord, transform solitude into sanctuary for this chosen one. Let silence become a place of renewal rather than discomfort. Meet them in the still places, in the unseen moments, in the quiet nights, in the early dawns. Let them discover that solitude is not emptiness, but an invitation to intimacy with you. Fill their quiet moments with revelation, warmth, and